Hey, my name is Dan Barrett, and I'm speaking to you today as the chair of the UNDE 625 Action Committee. I'm a member of the Greater Toronto Area Council, and as part of the Action Committee, we look at, among other things, political action. So today's talk about the 19 minutes on the 19th for June more or less revolves around this whole concept of the what we touched on last time, which was the petition thing. So, they're back at the table, at least for the Treasury Board, so our folks, our bargaining teams are bargaining on the other substantive matters. That $900 million cost for the current sick leave provision has been grossly over-exaggerated. Essentially, you're talking about an unfunded liability concept, which in theory sounds good, but in reality, it would require every single public servants to book all of their sick all at the same time. That's never going to happen. We don't get any kind of a cash out like some of the media has been confusing. So basically, if you're sick, you take sick leave, and instead of coming into work and infecting the public, which is sort of something one would hope the public would be in favor of. A lot of stuff in the media recently about how the Supreme Court, is making horrible rulings. We have recently had that decision by the Supreme Court where they overturned a piece of legislation on the use of marijuana. Must be smoking to cause cancer more effectively, as being sort of an irregular or irrational sort of thing for the government to turn around and say, you can't take it as a cookie or as a cake or as a pill. It must only be taken as in its original form, smoked or something. It's essentially speaks to the whole concept of how you're trying to make legislation that's not based on fact, not based on actual weighing the benefits to a particular program versus the dangers. It's just straight, what kind of rhetoric can we actually spout about this particular thing? So essentially that example there, that's the court ruling, ignoring stuff and blaming the courts for, it wasn't our fault. The courts basically overruled us. Well, had you written legislation that made sense in the first place, you wouldn't have an issue. But no, it's the court's fault. It's not ours. Can't possibly, government can't possibly be wrong. It must be the courts, right? You appointed 5 of these 7 of these people. Like, come on, get on with the program, will you? Last bit there, the United Nations IMF has found the actions which undermine collective bargaining process further aggravate wage and benefit disparity. That's your 1%. So if you're looking at areas where you have a degree of union participation hasn't been totally outlawed or whatever, you have a balance where CEOs are not paid at such an exorbitant rate that you undermine the entire integrity of the organization and the future prospects. So, once you start paying people for performance benefits that actually, are not like based on widgets, they're based on something that's essentially requires your gray matter to be working. Once you start doing that kind of incentivization, you actually stop people from being innovative and forward-looking. You're just looking at how can I maximize the immediate profit, and that kind of stuff is not in the better interest of the long-term interest of the organization. It's only in the short term, which is the way our stock market actually runs right now. So that's another broadcast. So, anyways, we had this new petition put in, and from the folks from PSAC. So this is the one that's before us, before our members right now. That's to our Mr. Clement there. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled that freedom of association contained in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms includes the right to free collective bargaining. The latest Conservative Budget Implementation Act violates our rights to collective bargaining. We, the undersigned, demand that you respect our rights to collective bargaining. In other words, remove Division 20 from Bill C-59. Okay, that's an English translation, but you know. So we're looking at having this one circulated to our members. This is the national one, and so that's the petition end of things. Now I'm going to move into the whole political action thing. So C-59, that's one end of it, but there's a whole series of legislations that are currently before the House that, essentially, you need to understand when are they actually going to be before the House, because that's your time limit to react. So if you want to put a call into your MP, you better do it before he actually has to vote. Or if you want to go visit your MP, you want to know when your MP is actually going to be in. There's, or even if you're looking at the upcoming election, who are the candidates? What am I going to ask these people? And that's those kind of questions. You need some tools to do that. So I'm going to try and point you in the direction. I got some web pages I'm going to show you quick. Okay, so this is the Government of Canada's website, Parliament of Canada. So if you Google Parliament of Canada, it'll take you to more or less this page. It should be the first link. And in here you see a bunch of different categories. And the one that we're going to talk about a little bit is this one over here. And it talks about bills. Okay, so this is the bills page. So you can see the little knobby here is clicked for the bills. Scroll up a little bit. You can see it starts. There's the legislation there. The C1, C2, C3, 4, 5, 6, blabbity, blabbity, blabbity. It only has about 20 pages or 20 pieces, 20 documents on it there. So when you get to the bottom, you just tab it over to the next one. Eventually, you get to the one which is going to take as an example, which is C-59. Okay, so here's C-59, and you can see it's from the Minister of Finance, and that it's at more or less committee. So at the very bottom, you see there's two gas gauge things there. I don't know if I can point at it properly, but it's over here. See that? So it's a bunch of slots there. And that represents the whole process, so where it is in the process. So right now it's at committee. If you guys were paying attention there, you might have noticed that there was some committee hearings at which PSAC and PIPS spoke. So if you want to know what they said and what some of the other members of Parliament are saying, we might be able to find that in Hansard. But bottom line, that's where the piece of legislation is, and if you want to track that, that's a good idea to know when it's actually going to come before the House for a final vote. But right now, it's at the second stage of the legislation. But because it's related to the budget, it's going to go through pretty quick. Just below that, you see the status of the bill, right? So you can see that it's gone through, first reading, and there's the second reading. And now it's at committee, and in Committee on Finance, and all these different dates occurred where you had different meetings, and essentially at the end of the day you had the committee reporting the bill without amendments, right? What a shock, particularly as the committee is dominated by Conservative members. And then right now there's a concurrence for the reporting stage. So basically the Finance Committee has done its piece, and now it's off to the Senate. And the Senate has more or less got, in this particular case, a number of pre-briefing notes related to it. So that's essentially where this is. So you've got the two little dashes. Technically, the reporting period of concurrence is you've got the first reading, second reading. It's gone to committee for reporting. Now it has to go to the Senate. So that's the status of that particular bill. Now, so the Hansard is the document that the government uses to outline exactly what's said in session. Finding information about what actually occurs in these sessions is a little bit less than obvious. When you go to some of the links, you see a lot of dialogue between the committee members as a transcript, and but it's so nauseating that trying to find anything in it is pretty well kind of hard. So I'm hoping that Google will be able to search something better for it. Essentially, what we're trying to do with these petitions is, provide some feedback to our MPs, and specifically in the process that we're trying to do right now through the PSAC directly, through the petition to Mr. Clement, and from the local members to one of our local MPs. The whole reality of the labor movement, where you're trying to basically make sure that workers have a decent wage, and that you have some semblance of stability within the labor market. It's in everybody's interest. It's in the public's interest to essentially make sure that the unions can function properly, that you have enough checks and balances in the system, that you don't essentially undermine the very ability of the economy to function. The 1% of the folks that are so rich that it's not really going to matter to them if unions cease to exist or not. But to the people who are doing the work, this is the whole race to the bottom thing. So it's not a good thing that we have to depend on having to eat out of a dollar store in order to basically survive. You have to have enough of a middle class to kind of keep the balance in a society, so that you share the wealth, you share the burden, and everybody basically is better off for it. So make sure that you sign up on these petitions for the Respect Our Rights petition, and our locals petition on the Bill C-59 there, and have a good 19th on the 19th in this National Public Service Week. Thank you.